Hi. Welcome to Finance, Business and Investing. An advertisement for a company called Warner & Swayze used to say that the company that needs a new machine tool but hasn't purchased it is already paying for it. Charlie Munger, the vice chairman of Berkshire Hathaway and one of the world's most successful investors, says that this also applies to thinking tools. The man who needs but has not yet acquired a new thinking tool is already paying for it. It's amazing how resistant some people are to learning anything. The following is what Warren Buffett has said about Charlie Munger. Charlie has the world's best 30-second mind. He works his way from A to Z. He sees the essence of everything in one move before you can finish your sentence. How he does it is by observing reality and comparing it to his mental models. This series of videos will cover some of the most important models that Charlie Munger uses and has publicly discussed. These mental models have assisted Munger in conquering the stock market, but they are so diverse that they have applications in many other areas, such as being a successful chairman at a large hospital and overcoming devastating personal losses. I asked you guys a few weeks ago what topics you were most interested in other than investing in this series, and you'll learn how the models can be applied in these areas to some extent as well. Maybe you're not interested in amazing rewards, avoiding a lot of misery, or being able to serve everything you care about in life. If that's your attitude, disregard what you're about to learn in this series because you're already on the right track. Let's get started. We'll start with a meta model, which I believe is the best place to start before diving into the specifics. Charlie Munger's first mental model is the Swiss Army knife approach. If you're going to learn how to drive a car, you understand that simply learning how to use the accelerator isn't enough. Actually, I'm just learning how to use the accelerator. Everyone who drives a car almost guarantees that you will injure yourself and others before becoming a successful driver. You must learn how to use the steering wheel, brakes, rear view mirror, gear shift, interpret road signs, Hong Kong people when they do stupid things that you would never do because you are an above-average driver, and so on. Of course, the world is far more complicated than a car. In such a world, if you want to be a successful thinker, you must learn about many different ideas, which Charlie Munger refers to as worldly wisdom. He estimates that he has about 100 mental models in his head that he uses on a regular basis. But there's no need to panic because he also says you don't have to know everything. The majority of the terror is carried by a few really big ideas. By definition, this will be a game in which you will use multiple techniques and models, and prior experience will be extremely beneficial. Here's another analogy to the hammerman. Every issue appears to be a nail. Remember what I said in the introduction. If you need a new tool but haven't yet purchased it, you're already paying for it. The man with the hammer is paying for his ignorance because he will torture reality to fit the only model he knows about, which is a stupid way of acting because the world will not change. The man with the hammer will fall flat on his face. You'd rather be the man with the Swiss Army knife. The man with the Swiss Army knife understands that different problems require different tools, and he is prepared to use the best tool for the given situation. The man with the hammer syndrome is a classic problem within many corporations. Have you ever thought that the marketing department is too concerned with marketing and not enough with product quality? It's even worse within academic departments, where people are either too afraid or too proud to cross boundaries and pick up important ideas from fields other than their own. One of the reasons that really smart people come up with really silly concepts is that they do not consider other subjects, such as one of the Nobel Prize winners in economics who came up with the efficient market hypothesis. He was too focused on his own economic model of the rational man and not enough on other important psychological and human misjudgment ideas that we will learn more about later in this series. There's something to be said for remembering the obvious across multiple fields of study rather than understanding the exotic within a single one. Many of these obviously useful tools come from those who are no longer with us, so make friends with the illustrious dead. I would argue that you are not limited to choosing your mentors from living people. Some of the best people have passed away. According to the Population Reference Bureau, approximately 117 billion people have ever walked the Earth's surface. Among these are more than half were born within the last 2,000 years. Over 30 billion have been printed since the invention of the printing press. Most of the people who have ever walked the Earth's surface have passed away. However, a few of the most intelligent are still among us. In their own words, Sir Isaac Newton, one of the most influential people in history, is buried with an unusual inscription. Charlie Munger has been referred to as a book with legs by his close friends, and it would be an understatement to say that he enjoys reading a lot. Reading is an important part of acquiring worldly knowledge. As the well-known author, to be honest, Mark Twain said that the man who doesn't read good books has no advantage over the man who can't read them. I don't believe that the medium through which you obtain information is particularly important. It's just that books used to be the most popular way for information to spread, but regardless of how you choose to do it, whether through books, podcasts, or YouTube videos, you should always strive to master the best things that others have already figured out. Don't try to come up with it yourself. No one is that smart, but Charlie Munger is known for going one step further than most people. He even suggests making friends with the people you're trying to learn from. This, I believe, can be interpreted in two ways. It is beneficial to study the most successful people in a few fields so thoroughly that you begin to regard them as your friends, just as a fan can obsess over a band, and you want to learn as much as possible about where your mentors come from in addition to their teachings, because this will allow you to understand their biases in order to make this series of videos. I certainly made Charlie Munger my friend, and if you asked my girlfriend if she's jealous of anyone right now, it wouldn't be some other girl at the gym or something. Charlie Munger is the answer. Charlie Munger himself made Benjamin Franklin, one of America's press founding fathers, into his best friend. The title of one of the most comprehensive works on Munger. Benjamin Franklin's yearly booklets called Poor Richard's Almanack, which he wrote under a pseudonym, inspired Poor Charlie's Almanack. In a different sense, Munger refers to the authors of some of the books he's read as fathers. Be cautious about who you choose to learn from. The first rule of acquiring worldly wisdom is to simply consume a large amount of information. The second rule, however, is that you must consider where you are getting your information. Even if you study the stock market for hundreds of hours, you may find yourself stuck in one spot. Sir, Isaac Newton, if you're only trying to learn from TikTok traders. Again, if I've seen any further, it's by standing on the shoulders of giants. He didn't say standing on the shoulders of midgets. Always invert. In a previous video, I described this mental model as a method of reverse engineering things. But I have to admit that I no longer believe that is the best interpretation of the model. Here is a better explanation. In one of Charlie Munger's most famous speeches, a commencement speech he delivered at Harvard in 1986, he stated that there are three things in life that are guaranteed to make you unhappy: ingesting chemicals to change your mood, envy, and resentment. Consider the subtle off-white coloring and the tasteful thickness. It even has a watermark, my God. Furthermore, he stated that four things will undoubtedly make you a failure: being unreliable, learning everything yourself, giving up on your first, second, or third try, and ignoring the advice of inverting. The last point is a crazy idea, and it is the basis of this model. It is frequently difficult in life to come up with ideas for how to create X. What is much easier to grasp is how to generate non-X's and then try to avoid them. How do you have a happy marriage? A difficult question. Instead, how about this one? How do you ruin a marriage? You can cheat, which is one way to end most marriages. You have the ability to be completely unreliable and absent. Being abusive with substances is another way to run into a lot of financial problems, so avoid these at all costs. Things will most likely turn out halfway decent. All I want to know is where I'm going to die, so I'll never go there, as Charlie Munger famously said. It's similar in the field of investing. Avoiding harm is hugely important. Anything times zero is zero. No matter how good of a performance you put up before that. Talking about himself and Warren Buffett, Charlie A. said that it's remarkable how much long-term advantage people like us have gotten by trying to be consistently not stupid rather than trying to be very intelligent. Part of the reason this strategy works so well is that there is often more to lose on the downside than there is to gain on the upside. Returning to the topic of relationships, which, once again, I make no claim to be an expert on. It is extremely difficult to compensate for cheating on someone. Similarly, if you die, you lose everything, no matter how wonderful the day before you died was. A person who does not consider what can harm him and consistently attempts to avoid it, both in business and in life, will inevitably end up like the mouse who said, "Let me out of the trap, I've decided, I don't want the cheese compounding." The main topic on this channel is, of course, investing, and the most important model that you should be aware of within this field is compounding, which is a mathematical concept in which the value of an investment portfolio tends to grow exponentially and you'll only see diminishing returns once you reach really large numbers. According to Benjamin Franklin, Money has a prolific generating nature. Money can beget money and its offspring can beget more. For good reason, a snowball is frequently used as an analogy here. When you first begin your investment career, you most likely do not have a lot of money. If you invest $1,000 in the stock market and choose your investments wisely, you may be able to earn 30% per year, but that is still only $300 to grow that snowball of wealth. You must add outside capital at the start of your investment career. You will have to accumulate this capital by becoming a successful entrepreneur or climbing the corporate ladder. After a while, the snowball hits a slope, and this is where the yearly increase in value of your portfolio and its dividends contribute a significant portion of your total yearly income, say around $100,000. You shouldn't stop adding snow from the outside just yet, but things are getting easier from here. The third phase is when the snowball really takes off and your yearly investment income exceeds your working income. This could happen around $1 million, and you no longer need to add outside snow if you don't want to. Instead, you can focus your attention on steering that snowball into even steeper slopes. The compounding model is so powerful that if you just leave it alone, you're almost guaranteed to get rich over time. You can, however, negate its advantages by inverting them. The key here is to concentrate on what to avoid in order for compounding to work optimally. You want to avoid management fees by investing yourself or by purchasing index funds, brokerage fees by not trading too frequently, and unnecessary taxes by holding onto securities to avoid short-term capital gains brackets. Let's go back to the man with the hammer. This guy most likely adores his hammer. Perhaps he got it from his father, who got it from his father. It's essentially an heirloom. Perhaps he used his hammer successfully when he received his first promotion or started his first business, or even when confronted with a screw and a screwdriver in plain sight. The hammerman will have a difficult time replacing his old tool. Wow, rational. Many psychological tendencies cause us to cling to old ideas for dear life, and we'll go over many of them later in this series. But, for the time being, recognize that you do not want to be like the man with the hammer. Charlie Munger says that one should recognize reality even if one does not like it. True, especially when one dislikes it. You don't want to be like the people described by economist John Kenneth Galbraith, who are faced with the choice of changing one's mind or proving there is no need to do so. Almost everyone begins working on the proof. You also don't want to be like the people who, according to the famous author Philip, can't tell the difference between what they already know and what they'll never learn. Consider yourself as a man with a toolbox, and every new idea is a tool that can be added to or replace one that is already in it. Don't be sad because you realize you've been using an old and rusted tool for a while if it will make you more effective in the future. Be glad you found a new one. Charles Darwin famously stated that you must drive to destroy your most cherished beliefs. He used an unusual method for this. He wrote down any evidence that contradicted his previous convictions within the first 30 minutes because he knew the mind would reject the evidence for cherished beliefs otherwise. Even Charles Darwin's success could be attributed to such self-criticism. I believe it is important for people like you and me to consider as well. We always say that it's not the learning that's difficult, but the unlearning, and with that, I have nothing to add to Charlie Munger's first 5 mental models. Problems are sometimes easier to solve than others. Money in the stock market portfolio tends to grow exponentially if you don't mess things up, and if you want to become wise, you must learn the ability to unlearn in this video. You'll discover 5 additional mental models that Charlie Munger has publicly discussed, and we'll begin with what is probably my current favorite model: opportunity costs. Resources are not limitless. When you choose to do something with your time or money, you are foregoing many other opportunities that you could have used that time or money for. Let me give you a couple of examples. You put $1,000 into Facebook. That means you can't invest the same $1,000 in other businesses. The opportunity cost is the investment returns of other companies, which you were also familiar with because they were potential targets. You marry person A, which means you cannot marry person B in most places. Or person C or D. Otherwise, the opportunity cost is the life you never had with B, C or D. You are watching a cat video. The opportunity cost is the knowledge you could have gained from an investment video that you never watched. As you can see, this mental model is applicable to many aspects of your life. I'd go so far as to say all aspects of your life. The basic premise is that there is always a choice to be made, and not all choices are created equal. As a result, you must choose wisely. According to Charlie Munger, Opportunity cost is a superpower that should be used by anyone who has any hope of getting the right answer. Don't go too far with this. I'm hoping I'm not getting too meta here. However, even thinking about opportunity costs and attempting to optimize every decision has opportunity costs. There is something to be said for achieving good enough opportunity costs to actually save time. If applied correctly, opportunity cost is a powerful filter in life. If you have two suitors who are both desperate to have you and one is far superior to the other, you do not need to spend a lot of time with the other. That is how we filter stock buying opportunities, which Charlie Munger refers to as the measuring stick. The investing game revolves around identifying the best potential baseline opportunity and using it as a yardstick against which to compare other investments. Let's say you discovered a company that you believe will generate a 10% return per year for the next 10 years. You don't have to spend 30 seconds with someone promoting a 10-year US. To you, treasuries are your yardstick, or your opportunity cost on invested capital is 10%. So why should you think twice about something that currently offers 1.48%? And, of course, the person who has discovered an investment opportunity that is expected to return 20% per year is in an even better position. That person can sort through a large number of investments in a matter of minutes, which is useful if you want to learn from your mistakes by rubbing your nose in them. A Tola Monger's habit. For example, if a company you purchased in 2020 was down 10% year over year, you lost more than 10%. You also missed out on gaining 17.9%, which the market in general gained during the year, and I'm not even going to calculate how much I lost when I spent around $10,000. After wasting 6 months of my time trying to build an e-commerce business in 2017 and 2018, the skill set I gained from that failure more than compensated. I don't want to come across as anti-entrepreneur, but it was definitely a skill set that I paid a high price for. Mutual wagering. Mutual betting, also known as pool betting, is the wager system used at the majority of horse racing tracks. The main distinction between this type of betting and traditional sports betting is that the odds are entirely determined by the bettors. People bet on different horses, and the total pool of money will be distributed to those who bet on the winning horse after the race, with the superior horses attracting more money and the weaker ones attracting less. As a result, if a strong horse wins, the winners will have to split the pool among more bet money, resulting in lower odds. However, the opposite is true. If a weak horse wins, the odds for the other horses will be different. In this case, the strongest horse has 1 to 2 odds, which means you'll profit $5 for every $10 wagered, while the weakest has 29 to 1 odds, which means you'll profit $290 for every $10 wagered. This is an excellent way to consider the stock market. Often, newcomers to the stock market confuse a good company with being a good stock, or in other words, a good bet. Any fool can see that Apple is a strong company, but it is priced at 30.3 times earnings, which is quite high. According to Charlie Munger, the investing game always involves taking into account both quality and price. And the trick is to get more quality for your money. Furthermore, we look for horses that have a 1 in 2 chance of winning and pay 3 to 1. Mostly Berkshire in its history is what common stocks that practically couldn't fail. But every now and then, Berk takes an intelligent gamble in which there is a good chance of failure but a good chance of success. So the risk is worthwhile. The main point. Is it true that a good horse or a good company isn't always a good bet or stock purchase? Similarly, a weak horse or a weak company is not always a bad bet or stock purchase. Either way, you must consider both the horse's superiority and the odds that you are receiving. Alternatively, the underlying company's quality and the price you are paying. The trick is always the same, no matter what. You're looking for an underpriced bet. The fittest survive. Charles was born in 1869. Darwin published the 5th edition of On the Origin of Species, and this is where he coined the phrase, survival of the fittest. Organisms that are better adapted to their environment are better at surviving and reproducing. Dinosaurs, for example, are living proof of this. Instead, a distinct set of characteristics and skills is required to allow each organism to pass on its genes to the next generation. Humans are unique in many ways, including our intelligence, ability to use tools, and ability to sweat. This has enabled us to achieve global success. Other species, on the other hand, use very different sets of abilities and compete successfully. In my opinion, the cockroach is one of the most fascinating examples because it hasn't had to undergo any major changes in an estimated 300 million years. Other species may not be as widely distributed as humans or roaches, but through specialization, they successfully occupy small and unusual niches. The sloth on paper is one example. It may not appear to be successful based on its physical stats, but it compensates by not requiring too much energy to survive and eating leaves with little competition. This is a great analogy for entrepreneurship and investing. Species compete for food, water, and space on Earth, while businesses compete for customers, time, and money. Specialization is important in both nature and business, according to Charlie Munger. People who narrowly specialize, just like in an ecosystem, can become extremely adept at occupying some tiny niche. Assume you're considering starting your own YouTube channel. You've been going to the gym a lot lately, so you decide to start a fitness channel. You're going to face a lot of tough competition. There are numerous excellent channels on this subject. So, if you want to succeed as a fitness professional, you must be exceptional at what you do. You should try to specialize more as a YouTuber or in business in general, at least when you're first starting out. For example, I discovered this guy who is a daily vlogger and squats every day. He has a decent number of followers and is most likely making a good living from his channel despite not having the most visually appealing content. He did it by occupying a niche in which few others would want to compete, squatting every day. Are you serious? That's difficult. I remember coming down to the Omaha Club and seeing an old gentleman who came in around 10:30 every morning. He obviously did almost no work and was very wealthy. He articulated your concept perfectly. But he piqued my interest. As a child, I used to ask my father, how in the hell does he do that? And he said, Charlie, he's in a business with almost no competition. He collects and renders dead horses. This also applies to investing. By the way, if you're looking for undervaluations in FANG stocks, for example, guess what? You'll be in good company. There are currently 53 professional analysts who have public opinion about Facebook. If you want a better chance of finding the previously discussed mispriced gambles, you must look in less obvious places. If you specialize and learn a lot about a few listed companies with market capitalizations of less than $100 million, you will occasionally be able to deploy your capital at very high rates of return and margins of safety. I'm sure you've heard of this mental model. But in this case, I'll give it a shot. Graham, Benjamin. The term, margin of safety, for stock market investments was coined by Warren Buffett's teacher and author of The Intelligent Investor. This means that you should only buy a stock if you believe you can get it at a reasonable discount to its true value. Benjamin Graham refers to this as intrinsic value. Very straightforward. If you are offered something that appears to be a $1 bill, you should insist on paying no more than 50 cents for it. Because calculating the true value of an investment typically involves a lot of estimations and assumptions, you should always insist on investing with a margin of safety. You simply want to protect yourself against the possibility that some of your estimates were overly optimistic. Yes, it's an intriguing application of Ben Graham's margin of safety principle. A lot of things have gone wrong that we didn't expect, but we're still having fun. Now, add a twist to this to see where else in engineering marginal safety can be applied. For example, when building bridges and power plants, a margin of safety is required to keep these systems fail-safe within this field. The mental model is more commonly known as redundancy. However, the principle of redundancy is not always followed, which can have disastrous consequences. There's also something referred to as a margin of trust by Charlie Munger. He believes that you should never do business with or marry someone you cannot fully trust if your marriage proposal includes a 47-page contract outlining how you should divide your resources. Should you ever get married? You might want to consider finding another spouse. Even biology employs a margin of safety. Consider the human body. We have 2 arms, 2 eyes, 2 ears, 2 kidneys, 2 lungs, 10 fingers, many teeth, and fat for energy storage. Some of these have advantages other than adding a layer of redundancy. However, I find it fascinating that the concept of a margin of safety is built into almost every cleverly designed system, at least those that last over time. Incentives have superpowers. In terms of modern safety, bridge builders in ancient Rome had to stand beneath their structures when they were first opened to the public. Why? Because the Romans understood the power of incentives and knew that with this rule, No bridge builder would forget to include a little bit of redundancy in its structure. You definitely think twice about using cheaper materials that could jeopardize the bridge's quality, which is also in the public's interest. Later in this series, you'll discover no less than 25 human tendencies that are all common causes of a lot of misjudgment. One of these tendencies, however, is what Charlie Munger refers to as the reward and punishment. I believe that the super response tendency is so important that it deserves its own takeaway. As Benjamin Franklin once said, "Would you persuade speak of interest, not reason?" A story told by Charlie Munger will help you understand the power of incentives. The delivery service company, now known as FedEx, used to have major issues with the most basic component of its business system, which was shifting packages quickly in a central location. Every night, the company tried a variety of approaches to motivate the night shift workers to be more efficient. They tried to explain the moral aspect of the situation to them. It's your job, and you're paid to do it, but nothing worked. Finally, someone realized that paying workers by the hour might not be incentivizing them to work as quickly as possible. Instead, this person suggested that the workers be paid per shift. What if, once all of the packages in the terminal were redistributed for the night, the workers could go home? As soon as this system was implemented, FedEx problems vanished. Always consider the system's underlying incentives and keep in mind that people are frequently looking to maximize them in order to serve their own interests. Charlie Munger considers how immoral people can become if they are given the wrong incentives. Allow me to give you an example. I have a young friend who sells private partnership interests to investors. He works in a tough industry with low returns. And I asked, "What do you tell them you're aiming for?" And when he said 20%, he asked, "How did you come up with that number?" He stated that if I chose a lower number, they would refuse to give me the money. The English writer Samuel Johnson once said that truth is difficult to assimilate in any mind when opposed by interest, and Charlie Munger has said that in his entire life, he has never seen a management consultant report that did not end with the same advice. We are looking for the stock market equivalent of a racehorse that has a 1 in 2 chance of winning but pays you 3 to 1. It is easier to achieve success if you specialize, seek out a niche where there is little competition. A lot can go wrong in investing if you use a margin of safety, but you will still come out on top if you always consider the incentives involved when dealing with people. Independent thought. How many legs does a dog have if you call his tail a leg? Because saying a tail is a leg does not make it one. It is critical to have independent thinking in a world where incentives rule. This is the classic problem of not asking a barber if you need a haircut. Sure, the barber probably knows more about the decision than you or I do, but you must also consider the incentives. If you believe that such fraudulent behavior can only possibly extend to innocent things like haircuts, you would be mistaken. Unfortunately, given the wrong incentives, you can't handle the truth. People have gone so far as to perform heart surgeries on people who didn't need them in order to satisfy their own financial desires. One of the best ways to avoid being harmed by people with the wrong incentives is to always fear professional advice when it is beneficial to the advisor. Another suggestion that could be considered closely related is independent thinking. Warren Buffett claims that this Charlie will not accept anything I say simply because I say it, despite the fact that the majority of the world will, and I myself fall victim to this at times in investing. Contrarianism is a term coined by Benjamin Graham to describe independent thinking. Because others agreed or disagreed with him, the stock investor is neither right nor wrong. He's correct because his facts and analysis are correct. Buffett and Munger made one of their largest investments in a company called Blue Chip Stamps. This was a troubled company with around 10 legal cases against it at the time of their purchase. The investing community did not like this company, but that was reflected in its price, and Buffett and Munger saw the opportunity as a mispriced gamble. Charlie Munger is frequently critical of Wall Street conventional wisdom, and one thing he has been especially against is the use of as a measure of stock market performance. EBITDA is an abbreviation for earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. What is most upsetting is the exclusion of depreciation charges. Depreciation is more than just a cost, it is the worst kind of cost. It represents a monetary investment made many years ago. In other words, it is a cost with a high opportunity cost. You absolutely cannot rule it out. When discussing a company's performance, I believe you would understand any presentation that used the term EBITDA. You simply substituted the phrase bullshit earnings every time you saw that word. Using a beta to assess a company's performance is akin to using a Tinder conversation as a proxy for deciding whether or not to marry someone. Sure, it's not useless, but there are better alternatives. For example, in competitive diving, you're scored on both the performance of your dive and something called the degree of difficulty. The more flips and twists you add to your dive, for example, the greater the degree of difficulty, the higher the potential final score. Not so with investing, where simple decisions can be just as profitable as complex ones. To be a successful investor, you do not need to invest in advanced derivative contracts or companies at the cutting edge of technology. In fact, as we'll see later, that's probably a recipe for disaster. Very few people follow all of these simple ideas that have been presented and will be presented throughout this series. That is unfortunate. For example, Wall Street completely disregards the fat pitch strategy, which states that in order to be a successful investor, you must not be constantly active. You should only swing when you are completely confident. Instead, Wall Street hires a large number of people, each of whom specializes in a single industry or sector, in order to form an opinion about nearly every company in the market. Nobody, least of all stockbrokers, knows whether the stock will go up, down, sideways, or in circles. They can hire as many people as they want, but due to the complexity of our world, some stocks will not succumb to predictability. I would say that if our predictions were a little better than other people's, it was because we tried to make fewer of them, which is a rule for life in general, according to Charlie Munger. One takes a simple fundamental idea and takes it very seriously. This is true almost everywhere. When I asked what you were interested in other than investing, only 9% of you said physical exercise. As a result, I'll try to limit the number of examples from this category. But allow me to use it just once to demonstrate the power of simplicity if you want to get in shape. It's extremely simple. Maintain a regular gym routine. So instead of going in there and doing random exercises, focus on the exercises that will give you the most bang for your buck. Bench deadlifts and squats are two examples. Always invert and remember that it is critical to avoid injuries, so don't sacrifice form for more weight. Eat well, sleep well, and that's all there is to it. Optimizing your routine with various macro and mesocycles can be beneficial, but nothing is more important than taking these simple and fundamental concepts seriously. You can let everyone else get lost in the complexity maze while you cut through it with ease. After all, common sense is not so common, and technology is a problem. Here's an unusual one. We all know that both Charlie Munger and Warren Buffett avoid stock market companies involved in new technology. You might think they're all dinosaurs who don't understand how these new things work. But, in reality, we all struggle to understand how these new things work, and forecasting the future is notoriously difficult. For example, just prior to the onset of the financial crisis, rating agencies gave their top ratings a AAA to hundreds of thousands of mortgage-backed securities. According to Standard & Poor's, the triple ace has a 0.12% chance of defaulting. In reality, how many of these mortgage-backed securities defaulted? A whopping 28% higher than the agencies predicted. Some predictions can be made with greater certainty. However, I believe that I have a lower degree of uncertainty than others. Let's give it a shot. Which do you believe is more likely? A. Chairs are still in use in 2030. The peanut brittle has also seen very little technological advancement. B. In 2030, we're still using TikTok. We're finally getting to the point. Technology is a problem for investors because it makes forecasting more difficult, and forecasting is an unavoidable part of stock market investing. Investing in Facebook is essentially a bet that social media will remain relevant. The greater the rate of technological change, the greater the degree of uncertainty in such predictions. This is why Munger and Buffett avoid investing in industries that are undergoing rapid change. They are more difficult to anticipate. The world's most intelligent question, not just for the dynamic duo, but for anyone. We are all born with a natural curiosity. We used to keep asking ourselves the most important question in life when we were younger. Why are the dinosaurs extinct? What causes people to become ill? What makes Pete think he has more toys than I do? Without a doubt. What is he saying when he talks about why? That is the most crucial question of all. And it is not limited to investment. It is applicable to the entire human experience. You want to improve your intelligence. The question you must keep asking is why? 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 Perhaps we were told too often that because mommy and daddy say so, understanding is irrelevant. Simply stop bothering me. However, it is a critical question. Try to regain that child's peace of mind by determining why things happen or do not happen. Because such information will improve your understanding of reality over time. In terms of statistics, people sometimes discard so-called outliers, which are results that were unexpected and deviate significantly from the rest of the data. If you want to understand reality, you should probably do the opposite. Study the outliers and ask why. How did they end up here? Why did Warren Buffett become the world's richest investor, and why was my uncle forced to declare personal bankruptcy? Why is Coke likely the most consumed product on the planet? Why was Enron able to falsify its financial statements and deceive the investing community for so long? I'm referring to the idea of using an extreme example and asking my favorite question: what the hell is going on here? In this world, that is the path to wisdom. Thomas Watson, the founder of IBM, stated, "I am no genius. I'm smart in spots and I stick around those spots." Nobody is surprised if you practice swimming, golf, football, horseback riding, and powerlifting all at the same time. You will not be as successful in one of these sports as you could have been otherwise. Investing is not much different. You want to buy a stock when it is cheaper than its intrinsic value. We also discussed how calculating a company's intrinsic value entails answering 3 difficult questions. 1. How much money will the company make? 3. When will it generate this cash? Where will interest rates be in the future? In other words, what will be my opportunity cost if you make better predictions about future cash flows of businesses in relation to their prices than others and win the game of investing? How can you improve your chances of success? One approach is to limit your guesses to areas where you are more knowledgeable. You will not be equally knowledgeable everywhere, and attempting to value every business will result in failure due to a lack of specialization. According to Charlie Munger, he and Warren Buffett categorize investment opportunities into 3 categories: yes, no, and too difficult. Those who end up in the too difficult baskets are those who are outside of their area of expertise. The following question is a great way to think about the boundaries of your circle of competence. What will the industry look like in 10 years, and how will the firm perform in comparison to competitors? Some businesses may appear to be right on that line at times. Munger has an answer for you. If you have competence, you almost instinctively know where the edge of your competence is, because it wouldn't be much of a competence if you didn't know where it was. As a result, I believe you asked a question that almost answers itself. It's the same as asking yourself if you can afford a particular luxury item. If you have to ask, you can't. And with that, I have nothing else to say in the following video. You will discover how your circle of competence can significantly improve the efficiency of your investment process. Filters are used to accomplish this. We learned that in order to avoid being hurt by people who have the wrong incentives, you must learn to think for yourself. You can cut through the complexities of our world by focusing on the most fundamental ideas and ensuring that you get these right. Industries that are undergoing a lot of change are more difficult to predict by nature. That is, for the long-term investor, technology is more of a problem than an opportunity. If you want to grow in wisdom, never stop asking why. Why? Simply because you are an adult, and limit your investment decisions to areas that you are very familiar with. Let's get started with one of my favorite mental models for modern investor filters. In the late 1980s, chess computers first defeated strong human chess players. Although the cream of the crop could still outperform computers at this point, the machines could perform hundreds of thousands of computations per second. Many more than any human being could ever hope to achieve. So, how did some humans continue to outperform the computers? Humans were still superior because they could eliminate 99.99% of all possible moves without even thinking about them, because humans used filters while computers did not. Filters are an extremely useful tool for the modern investor. There are tens of thousands of publicly traded companies in the world, which means you don't have time to consider them all in depth. What you want to do is reduce the number of investment opportunities to something more manageable, preferably to a new set of companies where you believe the returns will be higher than the average. This is completely inverted by the way you search for what you want to invest in by first excluding what you don't want to invest in. Filters can be quite personal, but let's look at what Charlie Munger and Warren Buffett typically used in their investment approach. Their first filter is a company's accounting figures. The following is what Munger has said. We generally judge by the past record. If the thing has a bad past record but a bright future, we'll pass up the opportunity. It's not clear what Munger means by a poor track record, but I'm pretty sure a company passed this test if it has a combination of historically stable earnings and a higher than average return on assets. Also, ensure that these profits are at least partially distributable to shareholders. Second, they apply something we discussed in the previous video, their circle of competence, simply by reading the description of a company on, say, yahoo.com. Many companies can frequently be filtered out. Third, you can employ my favorite mental model, opportunity costs. If you already own shares in a few great companies, you can compare new opportunities to these and eliminate them if they do not meet your previous standards. I would argue that the simple concept of opportunity cost is a useful filter in investing. If you have one opportunity that you already have in large quantities and you prefer it over 98% of the other options, you can simply screen out the other 98% because you already know something better. Fourth, Mungers avoid companies where he does not believe he can trust the managers. This could be due to A, they appear dishonest, or B, they appear to lack the necessary skill set. This is not a comprehensive list of Manga and Buffett's filters, but it is a start. Choosing investments is a complex task, but you can simplify the process by starting with no-brainer decisions like the ones presented here. The strategy of the fat pitch. The mountain is as tall as Everest. It doesn't take a genius to recognize that this is a high mountain in 1941. Ted Williams, the legendary baseball player, had a .406 batting average that season, making him the last Major League Baseball player to bat more than .4 in a single season. His mystery. He insisted on hitting the ball only when he was given a particularly good pitch. He partitioned the strike zone into 77 cells, each the size of a baseball. He then insisted on only swinging at balls in his strongest cells. Charlie Munger's investing game is arguably very similar to how Ted Williams acted as a batter. Charlie refers to this as, sit on your ass, investing. And he has stated, I didn't get to where I am by pursuing mediocre opportunities. No Man is the title of a film about great investing that would be made with Jim Carrey in the lead role. Warren Buffett is well known for claiming that he could improve most people's lifetime investing results by giving them a ticket with 20 punches in it, representing all of the investments that they are permitted to make over their lifetime. If you're only allowed to choose 20 stocks at a time, you'll think very carefully about each one. Of course, this is one of them. The art of sitting on your $1 and waiting for the perfect investment opportunity sounds simple in theory, but it is much more difficult in practice, especially when everyone around you is doing it. Those who discuss it on social media appear to become wealthy overnight by investing in Tesla or cryptos, but patience is required. If this strategy is followed, there will be very few mistakes in one's investment career. The nature of the mistakes will also change from errors of commission to errors of omission, and Munger and Buffett admit to having made a few large mistakes of mission throughout their investing careers. For example, they missed out on investing in the pharmaceutical industry in the 1980s, and they also missed out on Google and Walmart businesses that were within their purview but that they couldn't execute on. Nonetheless, as an investor, mistakes on a mission are much more forgiving. Remember that the first rule of the investing club is that you do not lose money. The second investing club rule is that you do not lose money. Perhaps more importantly, if you wait for the fat pitch, you'll have some dry powder to spend when it finally arrives because you're worth it. Charlie Munger made the following statement. What is the most effective way to find a good spouse? The best single way to deserve a good spouse is to be a good spouse by definition. This is possibly the oldest trick in the book, and surprise, surprise, it works. It is effective. The most effective method of obtaining what you desire. Perhaps the only way to get what you want is to deserve it. It is nearly impossible to miss if you work 14 hours a day to achieve something, treat people well around you, and maintain a long-term mindset. If you're a fan of Jordan Peterson, you've probably heard this one before. He says that one cannot twist the fabric of reality, which basically means that everyone will get what they deserve sooner or later. Yes, because you can't twist reality without having it snap back at you. I believe it is larger than you, and I believe that one of the things that really tempts people is the notion that, well, I can get away with it. It's like, sure, give it a shot and see how it goes. It's almost as if you get away with nothing. Let's look at an example. Some people make a lot of money on the internet by giving people bad financial advice, pumping and dumping stocks or cryptos, or whatever. These people believe they can manipulate reality to obtain something they do not deserve, but reality will most likely strike back. Perhaps they will succeed financially. That could be true, but life can respond in a variety of ways. For example, the scammer's friends may take notice if they are reasonable friends. The scammer may be unable to find a high-value partner. He may become ill from spinning that web of lies, and so on. Cutting corners is not the way to achieve your goals in life. Sure. When Charlie Munger was stationed in the army during World War II in Alaska, far away from many battles, I always said that the best way to get what you want is to deserve what you want. He figured out how to play poker. With that, he discovered a priceless investing tip. When the odds are stacked against you, she must fold and be willing to bet big when the odds are clearly in your favor. We discussed this previously in the series with the para-mutual betting system. Now we'll get into the specifics. According to Munger, if you do not learn about probability theory, you will go through life like a one-legged man competing in an asking contest. It's doable, but you're giving everyone else a huge advantage. What type of probability theory do we need to understand? We try to think like Fermat and Pascal, as if they've never heard of modern finance theory. Pierre de Fermat and Blaise Pascal are two 17th-century mathematicians who laid the groundwork for probability theory through an exchange of letters. The correspondence covered topics such as probability trees and conditional probabilities, among others, and don't turn off the video just yet because this isn't as difficult as it sounds. Let us suppose that A and B wager. A coin flipping contest attracted $100 each. If 5 heads are flipped first, A wins, and B wins. If 5 tails are flipped before the first coin is flipped, we know that they each have a 50% chance of winning this contest. But what if we check in on the midways and see that there have been 4 heads and 3 tails so far? What changes have occurred in the probabilities? What is the likelihood that A will win, given that she has a 43-point lead? A probability tree is required. There are 3 possible outcomes from this point. They can win or lose with 53 or 54, and they can win or lose with 45. Each of these outcomes has a different probability attached to it. The most likely outcome is that A wins by a margin of 53 points. If we add up these probabilities, we can see that while she had a 50% chance of winning at the start of the game, she now has a 75% chance of winning with a 43-point lead. This would also imply that if was a betting person, she would want to be offered at least $150, or 75% of the total betting pool, to end the game in this situation. Every day, you face decisions that can be analyzed using probability trees and conditional probabilities, though they are rarely as straightforward as this example. What are the chances that your business idea will succeed? What changes in that probability? Given that your mother thinks it's a great idea, what is the probability that one of the companies you invest in will go bankrupt now that you have your first paying customer? How does this probability change when the CEO says in the annual letter that he is optimistic about the future? How does the probability change if the CEO sells a large number of shares in the company? The famous bell curve. This appears to be the mathematical part of the mental model series because we're now moving on to statistics, and the most important distribution to understand within statistics is probably the normal distribution, also known as the Gaussian distribution or the bell curve. So let's get into it. In statistics, we plot data gathered in a graph for a more visual and understandable representation of the data. What we'll discover if we plot data such as the number of heads in a coin flipping contest, people's heights, the number of car accidents in a year, the time it takes to complete a 100-meter sprint, and the salary of a graduate student all follow this bell curve, at least in Sweden. The normal distribution predicts that data will tend to cluster around the average or mean, becoming increasingly unprofitable. The further we deviate from the mean, the shorter we get. The average height of a Swedish male is 182 centimeters. If you consider the likelihood that someone is 7 centimeters taller than 189 centimeters, you will notice that only 1 in every 7.3 males is 7 centimeters taller than 196 centimeters. 1 in 40. Only 1 in 740 people are taller than 203 centimeters. According to Charlie Munger, you must understand that many events and aspects of life are distributed in this manner, but you do not need to be able to do the math or derive the formulas yourself. At least not in order to be a successful stock market investor. Indeed, overconfidence in the mathematics of the Gaussian distribution has arguably been a source of much destruction in the stock market. They got the idea that Gaussian distributions would predict bad results in markets, and they chose that outcome because it made everything so easy to compute. They do not exhibit Gaussian distributions. To believe that, you must believe in the tooth fairy. Be especially cautious when applying the bell curve to data from any system that may be self-reinforcing. For example, m in height may not make it easier for a human body to grow even more, but passing 2 million in net worth makes earning extra money easier because you can put that money to work. You see that building? I bought it 10 years ago as my first real estate deal and sold it 2 years later for $800,000 profit. I thought that was all the money in the world at the time. It's now a day's pay. Individuals' net worth does not follow a Gaussian distribution, whereas their height does. We discover the following. You can quickly narrow down thousands of potential investment candidates to a short list of above-average opportunities by using filters. Investing requires patience. Munger did not become wealthy by pursuing mediocre opportunities. The best way to get what you want in life is to deserve it. Many things are distributed like a bell curve, but not all things. Probability trees and conditional probabilities are extremely important to understand if you want to be a rational decision maker, both in the stock market and otherwise. So proceed with caution when employing the elegant mathematics that comes with this normal distribution. Humans crave simplicity and elegance, which physics envies. Beautiful equations in physics include Newton's second law and Einstein's mass-energy equivalence. These equations are exceptional discoveries and are extremely elegant. Unfortunately, not all subjects, especially those involving human behavior, can be reduced to such Newtonian formulas. And this is where people make mistakes. A lot of the time Munger refers to this as physics envy. Professors in the social sciences want to be as elegant as their colleagues in the science departments, but it is simply not possible. John Maynard Keynes, one of the greatest economists of all time, was well aware of the problem of physics envy. He claims that converting the model into a quantitative formula destroys its utility as a tool for thought. And, of course, he was speaking about his own subject of economics, not about Newton's or Einstein's discoveries. In economics, for example, the supply and demand model is a very useful thinking tool. When a product is in high demand, the price of that product tends to rise. If a product is in short supply, the price tends to rise. If the opposite is true, the price tends to fall. However, attempting to put numbers on these things can lead to disastrous results. Additionally, numbers can lead to a false sense of security because numbers appear less subjective. There are numerous other examples of physics envy leading us astray, with the capital asset pricing model being one and the weighted average cost of capital being another. A third option pricing formula is the Black-Scholes formula. All of this I learned at university, and it pains me to realize that most of my efforts here have been in vain. If we go into more detail about why these models are flawed, I'm afraid I'll bore you to tears. As a result, I'll just give you the TLDR. The capital asset pricing model and Black-Scholes formula are incorrect. For one thing, they believe that volatility in asset prices is one of the determining variables in security investing, which it is not. I'll give her a chance to explain why WAC is incorrect. They said that if you earned 100% on capital because you had a fantastic business, your cost of capital was 100%, and thus you shouldn't look at any opportunity that delivered a mediocre 80% return on assets. And if a model suggests that one should not be involved in areas that produce such results, that model should be discarded. Vaguely right beats precisely wrong. This phrase is attributed to John Maynard Keynes, and this mental model is essentially a continuation of the previous one. Many professors with limited perspective solve problems like this. If I can't prove it with my experiments, it doesn't exist. You do not want to make this error in your own investment strategy. Do not overestimate the importance of things that are simple to quantify and apply statistical techniques to. They may not be the most important variables to consider simply because they can be quantified. This is one of the reasons Warren Buffett is said to have never used a computer or calculator to make investment decisions. It's all too easy to overestimate the value of what can be quantified. Returning to the capital asset pricing model. It claims that the expected return on an investment can be calculated by adding up a few simple variables such as an investment's beta. The model will provide you with an extremely precise number. This stock's expected annual return is 9.88%. This is part of what makes the equation so appealing. However, if you use it, you will be, in John Maynard Keynes' words, exactly wrong. It is naive to believe that a security's historical volatility is the most important factor to consider when making an investment decision. You're leaving out everything important. How dependable and skilled is the company's management? What will the company's industry look like in 10 years? How strong is the company's pricing power, and so on. These questions will never have quantifiable or precise answers. Except in Fiction 42, but at least you're looking at the right stuff, and vaguely right beats precisely wrong. Secondary and tertiary consequences. A butterfly is said to be able to flap its wings in the Amazon jungle, causing a storm to ravage half of Europe. In complex systems, it is very common for people to forget this. A single action will not have a single effect. It will also have secondary and tertiary consequences. Charlie Munger, a meteorologist, has stated that secondary and tertiary effects irritate him. Economic theory makes meteorology look like a tea party. Economics is so complex that even after the fact, it can be difficult to discuss causal relationships and which thing led to which. But allow me to take a shot at it here. A large earthquake in San Francisco in 1906 triggered a run on banks and corporate trusts. Attribution to the 1907 stock market crash. Up until then, record low interest rates of 3% in 1924 caused investors to become more aggressive, which in the end, was a component in the 1929 stock market crash and the Great Depression, or if you want a more recent one, the abandonment of the Glass-Steagall Act in 1999, allowing commercial banks and investment banks to operate under the same roof, arguably led to the financial crisis. These complicated secondary and tertiary effects have a few important implications almost 10 years later, for an investor. To begin with, it should make you realize that attempting to outwit the market by predicting bulls and bears is a terribly difficult, if not impossible, art. We've heard it from manga before, but it doesn't hurt to be a little repetitive around here. If our predictions have been slightly better than those of others, it is because we have attempted to make fewer of them. Second, there are specific cases where investors should be cautious. According to manga, it is very common in corporate life to forget about how competitors will react in response to a certain move, such as predicting huge cost savings by investing in new machinery or a new production plant. The return on capital in such a project may appear to be incredible, but this is often only when you consider your business decision in isolation. If competitors follow suit, prices in the industry as a whole will fall, and the projected returns will vanish. It's like being in a crowd watching a parade. Someone decides to stand on his toes, which appears to be fair to him at the time. He'll have a better view now. But, in a matter of minutes, everyone else is on their toes as well. Nobody has a better view now, but they all have a lot of lactic acid in their calves. The cancer operation formulating a business was something glorious on the inside disguised by terrible numbers that cause cutoff points in other people's minds as ideal for us. If only we could figure it out. This, I believe, is an important mental model for an investor in particular. And, as I had not heard before making this series, when performing cancer surgery, you are attempting to remove what is dangerous and harmful in order to preserve what is still healthy and vibrant beneath. Similarly, you can occasionally find investments with a great core but a lot of distracting and bad surrounding it that obscures the good parts. Consider a company that has multiple business segments. Perhaps they've diversified too much and neglected their core business. These new products haven't fared well, but the core is still alive and well. In a sense, the good part of the investment is hidden, which is great for keeping the business's price low. You are aware that I dislike discussing my own investment ideas. They, like regular business secrets, are valuable assets in my opinion. However, I will say that one of my current investments is an example of the cancer surgery formula. It's disguised as an oil and gas company, which people seem to despise right now because, well, they're probably doomed in the long run due to the environmental megatrend. However, the stock is not an oil and gas investment. The company has a lot of cash and marketable securities on its balance sheet, so it's more of an asset play. So the investment is disguised as an oil and gas company, but it's a classic Benjamin Gray play of acquiring a business at a discount to its net current asset scale. Before we discuss an important question that every long-term investor should ask himself or herself, what will the company's industry look like? To remain relevant in an industry 10 years from now, a company that you invest in must have a competitive advantage, which means it must do something that allows it to outperform its competitors. Scale is one of the most important advantages in many industries. In a circular tank, some scale advantages are purely mathematical. As the volume of such a shape grows faster than the surface, increasing its size requires less steel per cubic meter. This can help to keep costs down in a manufacturing plant. Other scale advantages are simply the result of industry characteristics. For a time, newspapers, for example, were truly a winner-take-all industry because of scale advantages. The paper with the most circulation attracted the most advertisers, and the paper with the most advertisers could hire the best journalists and write the best stories, creating a self-reinforcing loop. Some modern examples are even crazier scale, allowing a single competitor in an industry to truly dominate, such as Google. This page contains more than 90% of all search queries. Why? Google obtains the most data about users due to scale advantages because most searches occur here, allowing them to present the best search results. Furthermore, advertisers are aware of this and will pay top dollar to be seen by this user base on Google. This benefit is extremely self-reinforcing. In addition, there are more traditional benefits of scale, such as experience advantage, production efficiency, social proof, and so on. However, with scale comes bureaucracy, so the largest player does not always win. However, I believe that being a large player is often advantageous. However, growth cannot continue indefinitely. To summarize, subjects in social science, such as economics, cannot be easily converted into Newtonian formulas. Even if something is difficult to quantify and measure, it should almost certainly be considered in your decision-making process. If you determine that it is a determining variable for that decision in complex systems, action will frequently have unexpected consequences. Some investments have a fantastic core but appear to be terrible at first glance. And scale is a common method for a large corporation to gain a competitive advantage. However, trees do not grow indefinitely. People who expect perpetual growth, real wealth, and a finite earth are either insane or economists. Understanding the limits of any given system is extremely useful. Let us now discuss some practical limits for stock market investors. The first is that the stock market cannot grow faster than the economy over a longer period of time. This statement must be true because public companies are a part of the economy, a relatively large part of it, and if they grew much faster than other companies over time, the stock market would eventually become the economy. So, if you want to think about how quickly the stock market's revenue or profits could grow in the future, a really good metric to consider is the growth of GDP. Second, we have one that is related. The stock market can never return more than the sum of the dividends paid by the underlying companies it represents. You could argue that price appreciation should be included, but for investors as a group, they are not. When I sell shares in a company, another investor pays me the same amount. Buying and selling thus represents a transfer of value from one investor to another, never enriching the group as a whole. Meanwhile, dividends are a transfer of value from a consumer to an investor that makes investors richer overall. If dividends are the only thing enriching investors as a group, it is intriguing to note that the S&P 500 currently has a dividend yield of 1.3%, while many hedge fund managers charge more than 2% in fees. Third, according to Charlie Munger, return on assets is an important determinant of how much you can expect to earn from a specific investment. In the long run, it is difficult for a stock to earn a much better return than the business that underpins it. For example, if the business earns 6% on capital over 40 years and you hold it for that 40 years, you won't make much more than a 6% return, even if you bought it at a huge discount. Fourth, cryptocurrencies will never reach the moon. Did I literally interpret that as nonlinearity? A bridge might be able to support 5 tons without issue. However, at 5.5 tons, it collapses. Brazil nuts contain selenium, an essential trace element that is beneficial in low doses but toxic in high doses. Celestial bodies can be reduced to almost any shape or form. When they reach a diameter of around 1,000 kilometers, their own gravity forces them to round out like planets. If their size is increased even further, the celestial bodies will begin to burn like the sun. The top 1% of Americans own approximately $41 trillion, which is 16 times more than the bottom 99%. 50%. Many things in our world are not linear. A single amount of input does not always yield a single amount of output. We have breaking points, such as the bridge, where a few extra kilos will produce a very different result than if you did not. There's also the concept of critical mass, which is related to the example of celestial body size differences. Then there's the standard concavity and convexity. The classic example of nonlinearity in economics is marginal utility, which states that eating 2 apples is not twice as satisfying as eating just 1. There are frequently diminishing returns. The same can be said for money. How much more useful, for example, is it to earn $50,000 versus $40,000 per year? I believe that everyone sees this curve differently, but we can probably agree on a few specific points. The most important utility money can provide is shelter and food for your loved ones. Following that, you still have a long way to go before you can do whatever you want with your spare time. This is the state of FU money. However, the utility appears to be winding down after that. Cyclicals are another interesting example of nonlinearity for stock market investors. One advantage of purchasing these highly cyclical businesses is that many people dislike them. And what difference does it make if earnings average $300 million per year? It's unrealistic to expect every business in the world to have smooth and linear earnings if it arrives in a lumpy fashion. New car models aren't released once a year. Novel medicines aren't discovered on a regular basis, and blockbuster games don't fit into our annual calendar. Control your expectations. I made $49 million as the head of my own brokerage firm the year I turned 26, which irritated me because it was just short of $1 million per week. Marcus Aurelius stated that our lives are defined by our thoughts. Charlie Munger contends that happiness is the result of your actual accomplishments and expectations, and that the simplest way to become happy is to lower one's expectations rather than attempting the near impossible. I believe that having unrealistic expectations can turn an exceptional life into a perceived failure. Margaret told this little story about stock market expectations in 2001, which fascinates me, and I'll paraphrase it here. Years ago, a money management firm would tell their clients, "We know how to make a 15% return on your investment year after year." That was the case at the time. The majority of people said that was impossible. They say that in this climate, they were discussing the pre-dot-com verse. So, who cares about a mediocre 15% return? Munger concludes from this story that, in general, lowering one's expectations brings more joy than any other method. Furthermore, the person who believes that 15% PA is a poor return will be more inclined to do some extremely risky things to meet his needs. And such endeavors frequently have disastrous outcomes. Now, I'm a competitive person, and I believe that there is strength in believing that you can achieve great things if you work hard enough. However, the iron rule of life is that only 1/5 of all people can end up in the top 20%. It would be a shame if only 20% of all people, those whom I meet, could be happy with themselves as a result. They appear to assess their own life progress in terms of whether or not they are keeping up with their age cohort at Goldman Sachs. That appears to be the bare minimum by which progress in life is measured, and this cannot end well. The iron treatment. Regarding Iran, consider the following advice inverted. You must not feel sorry for yourself or that the world is mistreating you if you want to be successful in life. Sure. In some cases, this may be true. You can be extremely unlucky in life, and luck plays a significant role in determining success and failure. However, believing that something is wrong with the world will not help you. Charlie Munger is an excellent example of a strong character in this regard. Even as Munger's firstborn son slowly died of incurable leukemia, Munger stated that you should never, when faced with an unbelievable tragedy, allow one tragedy to become 2 or 3 due to a failure of will. In his 50s, he faced additional challenges. Munger thought he was going to go blind after a failed eye cataract surgery. Charlie Mungers began taking Braille lessons after purchasing books in Braille, which is a system of dots that can be read with your fingertips. The following is an iron prescription for life. Every time you believe that someone or something is ruining your life, you are the one who is destroying your life. There are 5 Ws. I need your clothes, boots, and motorcycle. Okay. Why? We're back to human psychology. And this time, let's talk about how to persuade someone to do something for you. Of course, this is a useful tool for anyone, whether an entrepreneur, a worker, or a husband. A clever little trick is to be extremely specific. Address the 5 doubles at all times. Who, what, where, when, and why should be used. The most important question here is probably why. The Harvard University psychologist Ellen Langer demonstrated the power of clearly stating your why. It went something like this in a clever experiment with copy machines. A researcher would be standing nearby. A copy machine waiting for someone to go there, then quickly approaching them with the intent of cutting the person in line. We used one of 3 questions. Please excuse me, I have 5 pages. Is it okay if I use the Xerox machine? Please excuse me. I've got 5 pages. Because I'm in a hurry, may I use the Xerox machine? Please excuse me. I've got 5 pages. I need to make copies and would like to use the Xerox machine. You'll notice that the third option includes a ridiculous why. Without stating it explicitly, it should be fairly obvious that this was the intention. But, what were the results of the first question? The researcher was allowed to skip in line 60% of the time, which is a fairly high percentage. That's what I'd say. Although the researchers appeared to be quite confident and dominant, using the second question with a real why improved the odds significantly, as the researcher was now allowed to skip the line in 94% of all cases. But the most interesting result comes from the third question, which used the kind of fake why 93% of people were allowed to skip the line simply because they stated why they wanted to, even though they used a really stupid why more than 50% of the time when the why was excluded. Consider this the next time you're trying to persuade someone, and with that, I have nothing else to say. That last mental model should probably convince you that we humans aren't always as rational as we think. When comparing, measuring and weighing things in the real world, time limits can be very useful to consider because you'll get an upper bound to relate to when making your calculations. A single amount of input does not always yield a single amount of output. Life's joy is arguably a result of both expectations and outcomes. The simplest way to achieve happiness is to lower your expectations. If you want to be successful in life, you must not feel sorry for yourself or that the world is treating you unfairly when you're trying to get someone else to do something for you. You always address the 5 questions who, what, where, when, and why twice. The 2-track examination. We've already seen that we can be extremely irrational when making decisions, and we'll soon get into a brief summary of arguably humans. The top 25 tendencies and biases. What Charlie Munger refers to as the psychology of human error. Just as a model has limitations, and you don't want to end up like the man with the hammer, you must recognize that human cognition has limitations as well. It is not surprising in the modern world that we sometimes fail to interpret situations rationally. Homo sapiens is thought to have evolved from Homo erectus approximately 300,000 years ago. In other words, we haven't spent much time in modern society with internet trading, stock market dating sites, and so on. Our brains were simply designed for a different time and era. Molly Munger, Charlie, Munger's daughter, cannot recall a single situation in which Charlie ever said, "Simply follow your instincts." Because of our irrationality, it can be useful to analyze situations from 2 perspectives. He has probably seen too much madness himself to give such advice. Charlie Mungers is the name. To track analysis, look at situations through 2 different lenses. First, try to understand and pinpoint the subconscious influences that human irrationality may have on the issue. If other people are involved in this situation, their biases and tendencies must be considered. Even if you are alone, you should attempt to understand your own biases and tendencies. Let's look at the stock market as an example. In general, stocks are valued in 2 ways when they are valued similarly to how we eat is valued in terms of its perceived practical utility to the user of the wheat. And there's a second way that stocks are valued, which is the way Rembrandts are valued, and Rembrandts are valued high to some extent because their prices have risen in the past. First and foremost, how much is the stock actually worth? We've discussed this before, and the answer is that it's worth the sum of its future dividends discounted at an appropriate interest rate in a rational world. However, we all know that this isn't always the case. Stocks are not always priced at rational levels. In the following model, we will list 25 of our species' most common biases and irrationality as identified by Charlie Munger. Keep an eye out for factors that you believe may cause the share price to be excessively high or excessively low. Human misjudgment psychology. Here are 25 human tendencies that can sometimes lead us to do crazy things, as well as reward and punishment. People will repeat behavior that appears to work and attempt to stop behavior that appears to harm. Liking/loving. We have a tendency to overlook flaws in things we like, dislike, or despise. We have a tendency to exaggerate flaws that we dislike, such as doubt avoidance. We have a tendency to jump to conclusions, which leads to inconsistency and avoidance. Curiosity, changing habits and beliefs is difficult. In fairness, we expect people to follow a behavior that, when followed by others, creates a system that works best for everybody. Envy/jealousy. We find it upsetting to see someone else possessing something we desire. If you haven't seen the video of the two monkeys who were given different rewards for performing the same task, you should. I believe you should return an eye for an eye and a gift for a gift. Influence based on mere association. We like things that are related to what we already like and dislike things that are related to what we already dislike. Avoiding denial while in pain. If reality is too difficult to bear, we'll distort it until it is bearable. Excessive self-esteem. 90% of Swedes believe they are above average drivers over optimism. We believe we are likely to defy the odds even in activities that clearly require no skill, such as lotteries, but you don't know what you've got until you're missing it a lot. Social proof. This is the herd mentality that can ruin your career as an investor. If you give in to it, in contrast, we believe that the $50 bow tie is inexpensive after purchasing the $500 suit. Heavy stress causes much cognitive dysfunction and frequently exaggerates what has already been discussed. Availability. Weighing vivid and recent experiences are more memorable, so we believe they are more important when making decisions. Use it or lose it. All skills deteriorate over time, and very high-level skills may have to be maintained on a daily basis. Miss drug influence. Don't drink and invest in essence as you get older because your cognitive functions will deteriorate. We have a tendency to defer to authority without asking too many questions. Twaddle. As social animals, we occasionally speak without first thinking. Some people are more prone to this than others. We value the why? Despite the fact that it may be complete nonsense. As in Ellen Langer's Lollapalooza experiment with the copy machine. We haven't gone over this mental model yet, but we will very soon. Many of these ideas came from Robert Cialdini, who wrote the book, Influence, and Charlie Munger actually gave Cialdini a share of Berkshire Class A to thank him for his contributions to humanity checklists. This is such a simple but effective tool. For good reason, no pilot ever takes off without first reviewing his list of security questions. A mistake at high altitude can be extremely costly for himself, his crew, and the plane's passengers. As we near the end of this series, it makes sense to discuss this mental model of approaching the world in a checklist style. Anytime you want to make a rational decision when the outcome of that decision is important enough for you to spend some energy on it, you should go through the mental models that we discussed in this series in a checklist manner. Charlie Munger uses them in this manner. You'll miss a lot if you don't use your mental models checklist style because the right tool is unlikely to appear when you need it. If you haven't practiced a lot, you can use the same method to evaluate the second part of the two-track analysis that we just discussed by going through the list of the 25 tendencies of human misjudgment psychology. Let's go ahead and do it. To answer the previous question, why are stocks sometimes valued at irrational levels? Well, the first point is definitely included. If a stock has previously gone up, people have become wealthy as a result, and this tends to motivate other people to buy that same stock in order to repeat the behavior that has arguably worked in the past. Point number 5 of inconsistency avoidance is frequently involved as well. This is why you should probably avoid talking about your stock market investments. You'll be setting yourself up for some difficult decisions later on, when you might have to contradict what you've previously boasted about. Point 13 is also mentioned from time to time, especially when it comes to companies that are more lottery ticket oriented. Number 15 is possibly the most important. When a critical mass of people engage in a particular behavior, it is extremely difficult to avoid joining in. As a result, behavior becomes self-reinforcing to some extent. As you can see, there are numerous reasons why the stock market can be overvalued at times. When these factors all come together in the same direction, you get the Lollapalooza effect. When multiple forces act in the same direction, it is high-stakes time. Depending on the direction of the forces, it can kill you or make you very, very rich. The Lollapalooza effect is one of Charlie Munger's most frequently cited mental models, and it basically means that 1 + 1 does not always equal 2. It could be 3 at times, and 1 + 1 + 1 isn't always 3. It could be as high as 5 or 6. Consider the case of entrepreneurship. One could argue that the success of an entrepreneur is determined by 3 factors: marketable skills, leverage, and effort. Keep in mind that this is extremely simplified. There are numerous other factors to consider when developing marketable skills. Simply put, how valuable your knowledge or work is to the world. Knowing how to do heart surgery is arguably more valuable to other people than knowing the history of landscaping in your garden. Leverage is how many outside people and how much outside capital you can add to your business system and efforts. For those who enjoy thinking mathematically, this cube represents the entrepreneur, and its volume represents his or her success. Each side of the cube represents one of the three factors: marketable skills, leverage, or effort, and the cube begins with 1 cubic success. Each side is worth 1 point. What if you add 1 to your effort? Your entrepreneurial success has just increased to 2. That's fantastic. But what if you add 1 in terms of effort and 1 in terms of marketable skills? What is 1 plus 1? Your business success has just increased to a 41 plus 1 equals 24. And, of course, you guessed it. It gets even crazier if you add 1 plus 1 plus 1. Your entrepreneurial success has now reached an 8. Stanley Milgram conducted one of the most widely publicized experiments on human psychology in the 1960s, and it demonstrates the opposite side of the Lollapalooza effect. In this experiment, participants were asked by authority figures to send increasingly dangerous electrical shocks through other people. The shocks were, of course, fabricated, but they appeared genuine to the participants. The experiment concluded that people are willing to harm others in order to obey authorities, albeit reluctantly. The experiment also concluded that this could explain the inhuman behavior observed in concentration camps and during the Holocaust. According to Munger, what the researchers overlooked was that authorities were far from the only source of human error. There was a lot of the Kaluza effect of combining factors working in the same direction here, which caused people to be able to do such cruel things to their fellow men in the name of knowledge. There is a distinction between knowing the path and walking it. According to the story, Max Planck, a Nobel Prize-winning physicist, used to give standard lectures about quantum physics all over Germany. He had the same chauffeur drive him to these lectures, and Planck practiced so much for his lectures that the chauffeur eventually memorized the entire thing. This must have been an unusual show, because he decided to ask Planck if he could give the lecture while playing himself, seated in the front row wearing his chauffeur hat. Planck put the chauffeur to the test and determined that it could be a fun prank. So the chauffeur took the stage in Munich and delivered the standard quantum physics lecture. A physics professor in the audience stood up at the end of the lecture and asked a very advanced question. The whitish affairs speaker responded, "Well, I'm surprised that in a sophisticated city like Munich, I get such a simple question. I'll have my chauffeur respond." While the primary goal of this story is to entertain, it also contains an important lesson. You don't want to be the person who has only chauffeur knowledge, which is someone who has learned to repeat what someone else is saying, for example, Max Planck. But when he's asked a question about what he's been repeating, he can't answer like a parrot. He can imitate some sounds, but has no idea what he's talking about. I'd like to point out that you cannot learn these mental models like you would for a school test. You must learn them in order for them to become a part of your daily repertoire. When you come across a problem with high stakes, go through them checklist style. Keep running them against reality and you will soon learn how they actually work and you will go beyond show for knowledge. Munger contends that reading leading business papers such as the Wall Street Journal Barron's, Economists, and so on is an effective way to repeat your skills and avoid becoming rusty. Their repetition is the mother of all learning, and you'd rather learn from other people's mistakes and experiences than your own because there is less risk and you can accelerate your learning process. With that said, 35 mental models later, I hope some of your previously cherished beliefs have been crushed. As I promised at the start of this, I know some of mine have. If you can't get enough of mental models, I recommend that you read Nassim Taleb, as well known in certain series. Taleb, along with Munger and Buffett, is the person who has had the greatest influence on my own thought process.